Um, we often talk about engineering marvels on this deep dive.
Right.
Skyscrapers, dams, massive bridges. But the subject of today's deep dive, it really makes the pyramids look like a sandcastle in a thunderstorm.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at Zenkalid Station, and I think the most terrifying thing about this place isn't even the size, though it is massive. It's the location.
Yeah, most space stations, they orbit a planet or moon, right?
Right.
Safe, stable gravity wells.
Right, the normal way to do things in space.
Exactly. Zenkalid doesn't do safe. It actually orbits inside the corona of a dying star.
Which, to me, that sounds less like engineering and more like a massive death wish.
Yeah.
I mean, the radiation alone.
It's extreme. It's incredibly extreme, but there is a logic to it. If you look at the source files, the station isn't just sitting there observing the star, it's actively engaging in what the documents call stellar siphoning.
Okay, so it's harvesting the star.
Harvesting its final breaths, essentially. It's pulling the star's plasma output to power this massive warp gate network.
So it's basically a parasite, like a high-tech tick digging into a burning dog.
Vivid, but yeah, completely accurate. And that context is just so crucial for you to understand why the station falls, because you are essentially building a fortress on top of a nuclear bomb that you are actively poking with a stick.
Right. The structural integrity relies entirely on these magnetic containment fields, right?
Mm-hmm. And if those flicker for even a second, the star just eats the station.
Wow. And so that is the setting for what we're unpacking today, this Starforge conflict. We aren't just looking at a standard military battle here. We're looking at a complete pressure cooker.
A very volatile one.
Exactly. Because we have 5 different factions scrambling to control this ticking time bomb. And the files we're going through today, they read like a masterclass in how not to manage a crisis.
Yeah, it's a tragedy of errors, really, or rather a tragedy of ambitions, because you have ancient warriors, corporate spies, nomadic fleets, and they're all trying to seize an asset that is already physically destabilizing.
It's basically the treasure of the Sierra Madre, but in zero-G.
Exactly.
Everyone wants the gold, but nobody trusts the guy next to them. So let's look at the owners first, the Zaleth. Because they built this thing, they're the ones poking the star.
Right, and the Zaleth are, well, they're complicated, technically brilliant, obviously, because they built the siphon.
Yeah.
But socially, military-wise, they are completely stuck in the past.
Yeah.
They're a very old guard military culture, extremely hierarchical, super obsessed with honor and building big walls.
Which seems like such a weird blind spot. You have the tech to literally harvest a star, but your entire foreign policy is basically just, we will grind them into dust.
It's a common paradox in history, though. Technological advancement doesn't always equal diplomatic evolution.
Fair point.
The Zaleth believe that because they have the biggest fortress, they are invincible. And they're suffering from severe institutional blindness here. They're staring so hard at the radar, looking for enemy fleets, that they completely miss the rot inside their own command structure.
And that brings us to the Trojan horses. And I hesitate to even call them that because it implies they were, smuggled in.
Yeah.
But the Zaleth literally hired these guys.
Exactly. They outsourced their own defense. So first, you have Thornir.
And Thornir is really interesting because he doesn't fit the warrior archetype of the rest of the cast.
No, not at all. Think of Thornir less as a soldier and more as a corporate auditor.
Yeah.
Or a liquidation specialist.
Right.
He's technically from the Karanoth clan, but his paycheck comes from the Forged Dominion.
And the Forged Dominion, just to be clear for everyone listening, they're essentially a government run like a hedge fund, right?
That is the perfect analogy. They don't want to govern the station. They just want to add it to their portfolio. So Thornir views this entire conflict as a balance sheet.
Literally just numbers to him.
Exactly. If the cost of defending the station exceeds its projected revenue, he's out. Or he liquidates the asset.
Which makes his relationship with the Zaleth commander hilarious in a really dark way. The commander is screaming about glory and honor, and Thornir is probably just standing there calculating the depreciation on the control room furniture.
Right. They're speaking two completely different languages. And then you have Faresh. If Thornir is the executive, Faresh is the technician.
The guy getting his hands dirty.
Exactly. He's an infiltrator disguised as a simple maintenance engineer.
And this is the part that just gets me. Because the Zaleth are so paranoid about security, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have these massive fleets patrolling the perimeter, but they let a guy they barely vetted crawl around inside their primary energy conduits.
It creates a massive vulnerability. So while Thornir is up in the war room, distracting the leadership with all this tactical jargon, Faresh is physically dismantling the safety protocols right under their noses.
Wow.
He isn't just planting bombs either. He is rigging the magnetic containment, the only thing keeping the star from incinerating them to fail on command.
Okay, so the board is set. You have the arrogant landlords, you have the corporate raiders inside the house, and then you have the neighbors banging on the door. Who is actually attacking the station from the outside?
So you have a triad of external threats. First is Drazar. He's a warlord from the Krizel.
Okay.
And he represents the brute force approach. He just wants the station for conquest, standard galactic domination stuff.
It's just the hammer.
Exactly, the hammer. Then you have Zolvir. Now, he is the wild card. He's from the Auric clan. And he does not care about the tech, the money, the conquest, none of it.
Because of the history there.
Right. The Zaleth betrayed him years ago, so he is purely there for revenge. He wants to see them fall.
And finally, Jovask, the nomad.
Yes, Jovask. He is arguably the most dangerous player on the board because he's undefined. He commands a Urakim fleet, and he's playing this incredibly dangerous double game.
Feigning neutrality, right?
Right, feigning neutrality to the Zaleth, but secretly cutting deals with Drazar. He's the guy who smiles at you while unlocking the back door for the burglar.
Okay, so we have the players. Let's get into the actual collapse, because it starts in the council chamber.
Yep.
And reading these transcripts, this felt less like a military briefing and more like psychological warfare.
Oh, it is gaslighting, pure and simple. You have the Zaleth commander posturing, doing the whole let them come, we will crush them routine, and Thornir, the advisor, systematically dismantles his confidence.
Yeah, he tells him, I have the quote here, he says, your confidence is admirable but misplaced.
Which is an incredibly bold move for a consultant to say to a warlord.
Seriously?
But it's calculated. Thornir needs the Zaleth to feel insecure, because if they feel safe, they don't need him. But if they're terrified, they'll hand him the keys to the car.
Right.
So he plays up the threat of the Forged Dominion's dirty tactics, which is highly ironic because he is the dirty tactic.
Exactly. And then he brings out Faresh to, quote-unquote, fix the conduits.
It's the ultimate theater. Faresh reports that these systems are stable for now, which creates this false sense of dependency, and the Zaleth buy it hook, line, and sinker.
Because they're desperate.
Right. They are desperate for a solution that doesn't involve shooting because they know they can't shoot a saboteur they can't see.
But then the shooting starts anyway.
Yeah.
Because Zolvir launches his attack from the outside.
Yes, and this is the distraction. Zolvir's fleet hits the outer shields, the station shakes, alarms are screaming, the Zaleth absolutely panic, and in that exact moment of confusion, Faresh triggers his sabotage.
And what actually happens technically here? Is it just like a big explosion in the basement?
It's much worse than an explosion. He destabilizes the siphon feed, so the magnetic field starts to fluctuate.
The thing holding the star back.
Exactly. The station isn't just losing power, it's losing its physical grip on the star. The radiation levels start spiking instantly. And this confirms everything Thornir just told the leadership, that they are losing control.
So Thornir makes his move. The source material says he demands control of the defensive grid right then and there. He says, your men are warriors, not tacticians.
And the Zaleth leader actually folds. He threatens Thornir, of course. He says, fail us, and they will rip out your spine. But he still capitulates.
Right.
He literally hands over command of the station's entire defense grid to the corporate spy. It's the point of no return.
But the Zaleths still think they have a lifeline out there. Because Jovask, the nomad fleet, appears on the scanner.
Yes, this is the false rescue. And it is just brutal to read about. Imagine you are on a sinking ship, you're terrified, and you see a rescue boat on the horizon. The comms crackle to life, and it's Jovask.
Right.
He says, hold the line, we are engaging the enemy.
The relief in that control room must have been just overwhelming.
And that's exactly the point. It lowers their guard completely. The Zaleth commander orders his own ships to form up with Jovask, exposing his flanks because he thinks he has backup coming.
So Jovask isn't forming a defensive line at all.
No, he moves his ships into a blockade formation.
He's not keeping the enemy out. He's locking the Zaleth in.
Exactly. He seals all the escape vectors. He tells his second-in-command, trap them in. Drazar wants them desperate. So the station transforms from a fortress into a cage in a matter of minutes.
Now, this is where the narrative shifts, though. Because up until now, the quote-unquote bad guys, the alliance of spies and warlords, they're winning. But then the alliance starts to rot from the inside.
Because it wasn't an alliance based on shared values or loyalty, it was entirely based on shared greed.
Right.
And once the prize is actually within reach, they stop looking at the Zaleth as the enemy and start looking at each other as the competition.
Okay, so let's talk about Faresh first, because he gets caught.
Right. The Zaleths aren't stupid. They eventually trace the sabotage code. An interrogator corners Faresh down in the power core. And this exchange is just chilling. The Zaleth demands to know who he serves.
And Faresh says, the highest bidder.
Yes. And then snap. He kills the interrogator and just runs.
He runs right into Zolvir. Now, Zolvir's the enemy commander who has just breached the station. By all logic, they should kill each other right there in the hallway. I mean, Faresh is the guy who broke the station that Zolvir is standing on.
But they don't fight. It's fascinating. Zolvir sees the chaos Faresh has caused and realizes, wait, you hate them too.
And Faresh says, I have my reasons.
And that is enough for Zolvir. He says, let's make them suffer together. It is a terrifying bond. One of them wants to destroy the station for pure revenge. The other is just doing a job. But for a brief moment, their vectors perfectly align.
They become accomplices in the annihilation.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, upstairs, Thornir decides his hostile takeover is complete. He orders his mercenaries to execute the remaining Zaleth leadership.
This is the corporate asset moment. Thornir stands over the dying Zaleth commander and says, a businessman securing an asset.
Unbelievable.
In his mind, the war is already over. He has filed the paperwork, fired the previous management literally, and acquired the property for the Dominion.
But he didn't read the fine print on his deal with Drazar.
No, he did not. Drazar, the Krizel warlord, broadcasts a message right at that moment. He says, you think you've won, Thornir? This station is mine. Drazar doesn't do partnerships. He wants total dominion. So he opens fire on Thornir's positions.
So now it's the three-way firefight. Inside a physically melting station, you have the surviving Zaleth, you have Thornir's mercenaries, and Drazar's invasion force all shooting at each other.
And this absolute chaos triggers the only act of genuine conscience in the whole story. Jovask,
The double agent.
the double agent, he watches Drazar start slaughtering everyone, including people who have already surrendered. And Jovask realizes this isn't a conquest anymore, it's a meat grinder.
So he flips sides again.
He does.
That's wild. So he betrayed the Zaleth to help Drazar, and now he betrays Drazar to help the Zaleth.
Adaptability is his superpower. He realizes Drazar is a complete madman. So Jovask actually turns his guns on Drazar's flagship to cover the evacuation of the survivors. He decides that saving these people is worth burning his own reputation.
But the station itself is done. The star is going supernova. We're in the endgame now.
The climax, yeah. Thornir sees his asset falling apart. He rushes down to the reactor room, hoping to stabilize the magnetic fields that he just spent all day having destabilized. And he finds Faresh down there.
And Thornir actually begs him. He tries to negotiate. He's saying, stop, we can control this station together. He's still trying to close a deal while the room is literally burning.
He can't switch off the auditor mode. He still sees the station as value on a spreadsheet. But Faresh is a realist.
Yeah.
He looks at the reactor, he looks at Thornir, and he delivers the defining line of this whole conflict. He says, no, Thornir, we let it burn.
We let it burn.
And Faresh sabotages the core reactor completely. He ensures nobody gets the prize. It is the ultimate scorched earth tactic. If I can't cash out, nobody profits.
So Faresh leaves, but Zolvir isn't done. He finds Thornir up in the control tower.
Yes, the final duel. And you have to really look at the motivations here. Thornir is fighting to escape. He wants to live so he can count his money. Zolvir is fighting to ensure Thornir doesn't leave.
The source description of this fight is just brutal. It's not some graceful swordplay. It's a messy brawl. Zolvir pins Thornir against the console. He's bleeding out. Thornir is screaming at him to let go. And Zolvir says, this station will be your tomb.
And then he hits the failsafe. He deliberately overloads the siphoning system. He basically hits the gas pedal on the supernova. Thornir screams, you're as doomed as I am.
And Zolvir just smiles and says, I know.
Yeah.
That is heavy. He accepts his own agonizing death just to guarantee his enemy dies too.
It's the ultimate cost of vengeance. Zolvir technically wins the fight, but he loses his future. It's a really stark contrast to Thornir, whose greed made him hesitate just long enough to trap him there.
So the star collapses, the station is vaporized,
Yeah.
just gone. What actually happens when the dust settles?
Or the stardust in this case. Well, the immediate aftermath is a massive power vacuum. Drazar flees, totally humiliated. Jovask manages to drag a few escape pods of survivors away, and that Zaleth and mercenaries just mixed together in the cods.
And Faresh.
Faresh escapes. But he doesn't leave empty-handed. The files say he stole critical data on the Forged Dominion's future plans.
Wait, but he works for the Forged Dominion. Why would he steal his own employer's data?
Because he's a mercenary at heart. That data is pure leverage. Maybe he sells it back to them for a massive raise, or maybe he sells it to their enemies in exchange for protection. He returns to the Dominion armed with secrets. Honestly, he played the game better than anyone else.
So if we zoom out for a second, the station is gone, the Zaleth are decimated, the Forged Dominion lost their prize asset. Who actually won this conflict?
Nobody won the war, but Faresh and Jovask won the survival game, and they did it by being fluid. Think about it, the characters who had rigid goals, Thornir with his greed, Drazar with his conquest, the Zaleth with their pride, they all lost everything. The ones who changed their minds midstream are the only ones breathing air today.
It really seems like the galaxy is in a much worse spot than when we started.
Oh, much worse. The destruction of Zenkalid was a complete realignment of galactic power. The Creal and the Forged Dominion are now blaming each other for the catastrophe, which is sparking a brand new war.
Wow.
And the surviving Zaleth are back on their homeworld, completely radicalized and swearing vengeance.
So history's just repeating itself.
Precisely. And the trade routes that the station used to protect, they are wide open now. Piracy is going to skyrocket. The entire ecosystem of that sector has just collapsed.
You know, it really highlights how fragile these superpowers actually are. I mean, we look at a station siphoning a star and think, that's permanent power. But it took, what, 3 guys and a bad attitude to bring the whole thing down?
Because systems are only as strong as the trust between the people running them. The Zaleth had the strongest physical shields in the universe, but they fell because they let the wrong people inside and didn't watch their backs. Trust is the ultimate defensive grid. When that fails, the physics don't matter at all.
That's a sobering thought for anyone running a large organization. Or a small one, honestly.
It is. Check your contractors.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But before we sign off, I want to circle back to that data Faresh stole. The critical data on the Forged Dominion's future plans. We know the Dominion treats war like a business transaction. We know they use spies and saboteurs to destabilize regions. If Zenkalid Station was just one asset, they were trying to acquire what is in those files.
That is the million-credit question. If the Forged Dominion was willing to risk a supernova just to get the station, what exactly are they planning next? And now that Faresh, a man with absolutely zero loyalty, is holding that roadmap, the next chapter of this conflict might be even more chaotic.
The war isn't over. It's just under new management.
Exactly.
While that is plenty for you to chew on, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the Starforge conflict. It has been a wild ride.
Always a pleasure to analyze the wreckage.
We'll catch you on the next one. Stay curious, everyone.